Om Mangalam Gurudevaya Devye Matriksha Mangalam Mangalam Bhakta Brindebhyo Sarva Lokaya Mangalam Om Stapakaya Chadharmasya Sarva Dharma Sarupine Avatara Varishtaya Ramakrishnaya Mangalam Om Stapakaya Chadharmasya Sarva Dharma Sarupine Avatara Varishtaya Ramakrishnaya Te Namaha Om Sadashiva Samarambam Shankarachara Majjamam Ashmarachara Prayantam Vande Gurum Paramparam Om Guru Brahma Guru Vishnu Guru Deva Maheshwara Guru Deva Param Brahman Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Om Bhadra Kali Namo Nityam Saraswati Namo Namaha Veda Veranga Vedanta Vidyasthana Evacha Shri Ganesha Sharada Guru Bhyo Namaha Hari Om Jai Ma Jai Ma. Happy to continue our discussions on the Devi Gita from the Srimad Devi Bhagavatam. And we're getting to we're coming to the final verses of chapter 1. We've been on these verses for, I think, for 26, 27 meetings so far. And so finally, the Devi appeared after thousands of years of austerity by the gods, and then the gods prayed to her using choice verses from the Upanishads, from the Vedas, from the Chandi, beautiful verses. And then the goddess herself spoke, and that's what last week we read and discussed what the goddess spoke. And so today, and what the goddess asked, the assembled goddess Bhuvaneshwari, is, why have you gathered here? Right. And then she says, why are you in any anxiety? Why are you anxious? Because they originally gathered because a great demon had taken control. They lost their position. They needed divine help. And she says, why are you worried? Am I not here? Ever attentive to you? I who dwell she dwells in Manidweep. We discussed what Manidweep meant. This highest heaven, as well as in the world, has been in our heart. And I'm a wish-fulfilling tree to my devotees to satisfy all your real desires. And since you're my devotees, and I promise to fulfill the desires and protect my devotees, and you're my devotees, you have nothing to be anxious for. So then the gods now are speaking their verses. They're describe. Actually, I'll share the screen. Let you see the verse where we left off last week. Oop, we're in verse 1. Sorry. You can see we have 80 pages of verses. Okay. Little old school, our style here. Okay. So just backing up a little bit, I'm going to start on verse 56 just for the sake of context. The goddess Bhuvaneshwari says, you shine with devotion, so why are you anxious when I stand nearby? I rescue my devotees from the troubled ocean of samsara. We mentioned this is her promise. I rescue my devotees from the troubled ocean of samsara. Know this promise of mine to be sincere, O best of gods. Then the narrator continues, hearing these words infused with loving joy, the gods were satisfied in their hearts. Right. And then we read the first half of this verse. We read the first half of verse 58, and so we'll pick up on the second half of 58. So the first half said, freed from fear, the immortals describe their own ordeal. Freed from fear, right? Nirbhaya, nirjana, the immortals, the ones who cannot die. This is the name for the gods. And I think we'd mentioned a little bit, this is a bit of a play, that the ones who will not die, why are they afraid, right? Death ultimately is a real cause of fear, right? So they describe their own ordeal, O king. Back to the original conversation. So we can stop there for just a second, dwell here a little bit before moving on. In the light of what they've experienced, their years of austerities, their years of sadhana, purifying their mind and heart, concentrating their, doing all these important sadhanas, guided by the guru, who here is Lord Vishnu in this story. also looking back at what they've suffered. They've lost their sovereignty and kicked out of heaven by this horrible demon Tarakasura. They've gotten instruction, they've done so much sadhana, and they've had this incredible experience. First, to see her as an infinite light beyond name and form, then to see her in her beautiful supreme form as Bhuvaneshwari, the goddess, the mother goddess and their mother, right? The source of all creation, right? And then was overwhelmed with emotion, having prayed to her. And then, even from this overwhelming experience, to then get further revelation or further questioning. Tell me what's wrong. I'm right here with you. I promise to save my devotees from this ocean of samsara, right? Already quite spiritually advanced. If we take the story seriously, the gods have already been so purified, already having major spiritual experiences, right? I can imagine if we had such experiences, we'd be quite overwhelmed, right? And even if the ego got involved, we'd think ourselves very spiritually advanced people that have had visions of an infinite light and seen the goddess and had her and had her speak to us, right? We'd be overwhelmed by that. But in that environment, right, in that moment, they're sharing their own experience, their own ordeal, the swakriyakam, right? Swakiyakam, their own struggles, right? And so they're actually their struggles in the light of what they've experienced, right? Their struggle has been recast. First, it was more simple, right? Not that simple, but more simple. A demon has taken over, kicked them out of heaven, and there's a big struggle because they cannot. That Tarakasura can only be killed by the son of Shiva. Shiva has no wife, therefore they're in huge trouble. But now, after much purification, much self-understanding, right, and tremendous spiritual experience of visions and auditions and samadhi type experiences, right, they can see their own struggle in a different light, in a deeper light. I think this is one of the things we have to understand. They answer in 3-4 verses, right? These are the verses we're going to do tonight. But even the main problem, a demon has come up. Please, you need to be born as a wife of Shiva, to have Kartikeya born to kill Tarakasura. That's the original problem. But now understand more profoundly. And I think that's how I interpret these sections. So we'll keep that in the back of our mind, and we'll end there, hopefully, if I can get there. The God said, let me get my own verses here. What is it? Nā'jñātaṃ kiñcidapyatra. I read it from this bigger over here. Bhavatyā'sti jagat-traye. Nā'jñātaṃ. The jnana, knowledge, root word is there. Jnatam is known. Nā'jñātaṃ, nothing is unknown, right? So now they're addressing her, right? These verses have, of course, Sanskrit poetry is full of rhymes and meanings, right? But there is a repeated sound in a lot of these verses. Nirbhaya, nirajaya, now here, nirmitto, nirmitto. So they're without fear, they're without death, and Ma is without nir-agnata, actually. So let me go with that. Nir-agnata means she's without ignorance. Ñā is knowledge. Agnya is ignorance. Nir-agnya, so she's without ignorance. So they're without fear, they're without death. Ma is without ignorance. So such a person without fear, without death, speaking to one who knows everything. She is without ignorance, right? So I think he's translated, there is nothing in the three worlds unknown to you, unknown, nirmitto. kiñcidapyatra. Anything here, also anything here is known to you. It says jagat. The main point here, jagat-traye. Nothing in the three worlds. Jagat means worlds, right? Traya, trayate, or traya is three, right? So what are the three worlds? So nothing in this world is nothing. Not only you know everything in this world, you know everything in the three worlds. So what are the three worlds? This almost trope to say, oh, it's the three worlds, right? Sometime he translated the three-tiered universe. And so this is the general understanding of the three worlds as presented in the text itself, is Bhurloka, which is the earth, the realm we're in now, the Swargaloka, the heavenly realms, heaven, you can think earth and heaven, or you can be a little more esoteric and say the earthly realms and the astral heavenly realms, the realms above the earth realm up to the heavenly realms, and then the underworld. We sometimes call underworlds, or Patala means underworld, netherworlds, or Naraka, the hellish realms, hell or the hellish realms. So it's to say the three realms, the three worlds, is to say the three groups of worlds. There are earthly realms, there are heavenly realms, and there are hellish or underworld realms. So you know everything in all the realms. So that's a big statement. Of course, only God knows everything in all the realms. We know a tiny little bit in our only in our realm, right? In this realm, we know a tiny little bit, that imperfectly, and most likely wrong. Right, what we know of our little world is almost guaranteed to be wrong. So limited that anything we say about it is so limited that it'd be more wrong than right. Right, I think that's an important way of keeping humble. Right, is to know that our opinion about anything is so limited that it's going to be more wrong than right often. Right, not that we shouldn't have it and we shouldn't try to know what we can, but just know that how much we can know. Right. Also, in the Brahmana Purana, it described the three worlds a little more psychologically, as Bhuta, Bhavya, and Bhavat, past, future, and present. Right. So the three worlds may be three realms, but also our own experience. We have our future, our expected future, not yet arrived. The past we've come from. Right, and the world that we're experiencing now, past, so seen through the flow of time, and actually this triune structure of the structure of reality, the three realms, structure of our sense of time, that same structure, that same trinity or triune nature seems to be repeated everywhere. We have the three different states: waking, dreaming, dreamless sleep. That's been dealt with in the previous verses. Brahma, Vishnu, and Shiva, the creator, sustainer, and destroyer. Three power: Satchitananda, Ichcha Shakti, Kriya Shakti, Jnana Shakti. All these trinities are there. So whatever these trinities are, she knows everything. Right? She's a knower of everything. So what does this say about her? That means that she is as Bhuvaneshwari, she is the ruler, and this is going to be repeated in all these verses, starting in the next verse, that she's the ruler of everything, and that she is the knower of everything. Right? That puts her in a very unique position, right? As not just knowledge, right? As an impersonal nature, impersonal description of how do I say, somebody's writing on my board. I don't know why. Elijah, I don't know what you're doing, but you're writing on my graphic.
Sorry, Guruji, I have no idea how it happened.
Interesting. Okay.
Let me see if I can fix it. I'm sorry.
Okay. Anyways, please ignore the lines. I don't even know how to do that on my graphics. So I'm a little bit ignorant on how these things work. But anyway, we'll leave it there for now. She's a knower and the ruler, right? We'll go more in the next verse. Let's go to the next verse. So what'd she say? Oh, the God says, oh goddess, oh the divine mother, nothing here in the three world is unknown to you. But she's asking, why are you here? What is your problem? Tell me, right? And their response is, they know she knows everything already, right? So why should they? So why we're speaking about our situation to somebody who knows everything, somebody who knows everything, and somebody who can do anything, who's all powerful. So verse 59. So actually, if we go back to this verse, I mean, we think about this very often as as devotees, we go to Divine Mother and we pray, right? And we pray for people. People ask us to pray, and we pray for people. We pray for ourselves, and we pray our own struggles, our own problems and needs. But we also pray, especially in our position as priests. We're praying to Ma continuously for those who are struggling, those who have ill health, those who are in emergency, those who are whatever this problem is, or the good or bad thing, we pray Ma, but we often have to say, we word it almost the same way. Ma, of course, you know everything, right? We know what the problem is. Such a person is sick, or such a person is struggling, or in financial difficulty, or in danger like this, right? You know that already, but still, Ma, and also not only but you're also all powerful and can do anything and are doing everything. Still, Ma, we're telling you, please bless such and such a person. Please shower your grace upon them. And we have some faith and some experience that she responds when asked, right? But then if she responds when asked, she knows and she can do everything before we ask. Maybe there's something about asking, because even here, in this previous verse, she asks us to ask. I think that's important. It's not only that we're creating some theology that we have to ask. She's asking the gods to ask and explain their problem and ask for the boon that they're requesting. Okay. So one point has been brought out about her, that she is. I'm going to end screen and start again my screen just to see if I can get rid of those lines real quick here. Do again. So okay, they're gone, which is good. So they don't haunt her throughout the whole presentation, right? So there's nothing. Like the first statement is, there's nothing she doesn't know, right? This is their realization, their statement. Now, a few more things are going to be said about her, not dissimilar. Sarva-jṇayā, sarva-sākṣi-rūpiṇyā, parameśvari. So, oh parameśvari, this is the form, oh supreme goddess, but actually it's just three things are being said in the first half line. You who are sarva-jṇayā. Sarva-jṇayā, you know everything. You are the all-knower, right? So you are here, he's translated Professor Mackenzie Brown as omniscient. That means omniscient means one who knows everything, right? Who's so omniscient. You are sarva-jṇayā, sarva-sākṣi. The second point, she is the all witnessing, right? She is the all witness, right? So these 2 points, you are all knowing and you are all witnessing. These are classical descriptions of Brahman in Vedanta. And it's a few verses earlier, the gods were using Vedantic style epithets to describe the goddess. Qualities of Brahman, right? So Satchidananda, Brahman is conscious, and in a lot of schools of Vedanta, one of the practices is to be conscious of our consciousness, be self-conscious of our consciousness as witness, our witness consciousness. Shakshi, they call it Shakshi Bhav, right? And you can see, and this is a practice, you can experiment with it. You see like what we're experiencing. So we see all these things happening in the external world, and we are the witness of that. We are conscious of that. To be conscious of it is to be the witness of it. That's a good way to understand what's meant in Vedanta by consciousness. Sometimes Is consciousness life? Consciousness energy? There's all these ways of understanding consciousness. Consciousness is that which witnesses, that which experiences. So if you see all these things happening around us externally, we're witnessing it. So there's a witness consciousness and that which is witnessed, the subject and the object, subjective. So similarly, we witness the states and changes of the body, right? We witness the changes of the mind. We witness the changes, the fluctuations of our emotions, right? Emotions come and go, right? But we can witness them, right? They're changing. The witness consciousness, in some sense, and most schools of Vedanta would hold that the witness consciousness is unchanging. You have the changing things experience and the unchanging experiencer. Of course, there are a few renegade schools of Vedanta and almost every intellectual school of Buddhism that challenges the idea that the experiencer is also unchanging, right? But the general understanding in classical Vedanta that the experiencer is unchanging, right? The witness, the Sakshi, is unchanging.
Oh, Guruji,
Yes, tell me.
would this at all relate to, or could it relate to the two birds of the Upanishads?
Yeah, that's a beautiful. Maybe you know. So this is a favorite story of Swami Vivekananda. He mentioned it several times in his various talks, but this is from the Ken Upanishad or Katha Upanishad. I'm forgetting one of the major important Upanishads. I'm forgetting. The story describes that there's a tree on which there are two birds. One bird on the lower branches eats bitter and sweet fruits, right? And when he eats a bitter fruit, it laments and suffers. And when he eats a sweet fruit, it's joyful and happy, right? But there's another bird. It describes a beautiful plumage, a gorgeous bird on an upper branch that doesn't eat any fruits, this fruit or that fruit. It simply is there, right? And the bird below looks up and sees the upper bird and sees it so beautiful and takes a few hops up, right, to the higher branches, and then it gets distracted by bitter and sweet fruit, right? Eventually, it reaches the high bird and realizes that it is actually non-different from that high bird. That high bird is simply the witness, right? And the lower bird, we can attribute it to the mind or to the ego, to the personality, experiencing bitter and sweet things, right? But the high bird, the higher bird, which is considered the real self in the story, it simply witnesses. So it's interesting because it's slightly different. I mean, I maybe because I wasn't expecting to comment on this verse, but it's very interesting, right? The lower bird's also experiencing, right? It's an experiencer, right? But the higher bird is witnessing different than experiencing. It's not tasting bitter and it's simply witnessing. So witnessing is even a little more abstract than the experiencer, right? It's the witness of the experiencer, right? Because the ego sense of personality also can be said to be the experiencer. The witness consciousness is even more refined, right? Perhaps. Is that okay, Swamiji? Is that I may have been, I wasn't prepared. I recently read several versions of that story to the new seminary students in my introduction on Hinduism, but I don't remember the point I was making when I read it. So it's fresh in my mind, but I don't remember why. I think it was just about the nature of the self. I think most likely, but so that's it. The witness that we are the quality of that experiment when we ourselves see what we are experiencing, that we are experiencing, we are the witness. So the self in the story and in our personal story is the one who knows what it knows, right? It's the knower, not the known, and it's the witness, not the witnessed, right? As an experiment, as a mental discipline to try to make that distinction, right? So in one sense, we are also knowers and we are also witnesses, right? But there is a difference here because we are not sarva-jṇayā and sarva-sākṣi. We witness some things, and we know some things, right? We don't witness everything, and we don't know everything, right? So there is a distinction, right? So, and in a few weeks ago, we talked when the gods were using that, oh Ma, you are the one indicated by Tvam and by Tat. You are both the individual soul and the non-dual supreme Brahman, right? So I read last couple weeks ago from the 4th chapter of the Devi Bhagavatam, where Ma herself will give instruction on how to understand Tat Tvamasi, that this Tat and Tvam and the Tat Tvamasi Mahavakya. He says that actually Brahman and the individual in essence are the same, are Satchitananda, right? But there's a bunch of other stuff attached to it. The other things that are non-essential. If we ignore the non-essential, then in one sense, at the core, in the most real sense, we are identical to Brahman, and the jiva is identical, but there's still other things. There's still other things that are not that are not identical. One detail that's not identical is that we have limited knowledge, and Ma has infinite knowledge. We know some things. She knows everything. We are the witness. We are Shakshi. She is Shakshi, but we are Shakshi of an individual, of a small array of experiences. She is the witness of every experience, right, and everything that's happening, right? So this allows, this kind of setup, right, allows for the in a very real sense an identity between the jiva and the Paramattha jiva and Brahman, right, while still retaining also a very real sense of distinction between the jiva and here the Devi, right? Because then she's ascribed, actually it says, oh parameśvari, also all-knowing, all-witnessing, and all control and all controlling. Parameśvari means the one who is the supreme controller. One of the meanings of parameśvari, the most obvious meaning of parameśvari, supreme controller. We also control, maybe not much. If we have control, it's infinitesimal, right? If we have knowledge, it's also limited, and if we witness, it's only limited also. She is all controlling, right? The supreme controller. She is all witnessing and all knowing, right? And so this is emphasizing both. It's while admitting the Vedantic unity and identity between the soul and Brahman and the Devi, it's still giving the Devi a unique exalted position. She's still Ishwari. She's Parameśvari. She is the supreme Ishwari, right? And so there's still some distinction, although ontologically they're the same. We're the same, right? But practically speaking, not practically in every way, and except that's the most fundamental ontological way, right? We are limited, she is unlimited. That allows for devotion, and this is a devotional text. We'll go into this, will culminate these verses. We're reading 3 verses, I think, or 3 or 4 verses today, hopefully. It'll culminate with a prayer for devotion as the highest goal, right? And so in order to have devotion, you have to establish her, right, as the supreme everything, the supreme knower. We have limited knowledge, we're ignorant, she's omniscient, right? So it also, so he has, I was interesting, I was really meditating the last few days on St. Mackenzie Brown's translation of this Rūpiṇyā, right? It says sarva-sākṣi-rūpiṇyā, right? So she is he describes it as the incarnate witness of all. Sarva-sākṣi-rūpiṇyā, or Rūpiṇā, right? And so other verses have used that term, previous verses, Rupa, Murti, Swarupa, right? It means form, it means one's nature. So it could be translated, you are the nature of, and in other places he translated this, he would have translated this verse and this line in other verses similarly as you are the nature of the witness of everything, something like that. Your nature is to witness everything, rupa in that sense, right? But here he uses you are the incarnate. I mean, you've taken a form. Your form, the witness of everything has a form, right? It's like you are the embodiment. Maybe that's a way, the embodiment of so the witness of everything is not just an impersonal ground of being. The witness of everything has a name, Bhuvaneshwari, right? Has a form of Bhuvaneshwari, has a realm, Manidvip, right? Has qualities. Here, her qualities are the qualities very similar to the qualities of Brahman, of all-knowing and the witness of everything, right? But she is all-knowing. She is the witness of everything. She is Brahman, right? And therefore she, because it's personal, right? Is the object of love and devotion, right? She is the one that saves us. She is the one we go to when we're in trouble. She is the one we need to love. She is the one, if we want to disappear into her, even that is a supreme act of devotion, from of interesting melding of classical Vedantic teachings with the bhakti tradition, right? Even bhakti as merging into her essential nature, if that's a goal presented in the Devi Gita, right? But even it's her essential nature, right? Our essential nature is to merge into her essential nature. Our essential nature is to worship her, to call to her, to pray to her, to relate to her. That's my take on these verses. And I think it's also his by this incarnate witness, the incarnate witness of Parameśvari, O Supreme Ruler. So what does it say? The first said, nothing here in the three worlds is unknown to you. You are the all-knowing, omniscient. You are the incarnate. You are your form. You are the form of the witness of all things. And you are, O Parameśvari, Supreme Ruler. So she asks, what's your problem? They will have to say their problem, right? So they do mention the original reason that they approached her, why they did thousands of years of austerity. Tārakeṇāsurendreṇa pīḍitāḥ divāniśam, right? Tārakeṇāsurendreṇa, right? Pīḍitāḥ divāniśam. Divāniśam means day and night. Diva means light or day, and nivasham is the opposite of that. So day and night, we are being pīḍitāḥ. We are being tormented. We're caused so much suffering by Tārakeṇāsurendreṇa, by Taraka, by the demon lord, right? He's the lord of demons, right? And of course, we have to remember. I mean, I don't want to. We've told the story so many times, and our setup as the opening verses describing at the beginning of this chapter of how this Asura took over the three worlds, how he did tremendous austerity and got a boon from Brahma, right? Remember, whenever a demon wants to get a boon from Brahma, the demons, they do austerity. Brahma then appears and says, "Ask a boon. I am satisfied with your austerity. Ask a boon." And the demons always ask the same boon: make us physically immortal. He says, even I am not immortal. Ask a boon that's doable. I myself am not immortal. How can I grant immortality, physical immortality, right? So he asks, for our story, the main thing he asks is that he can only be, his death can only come by the several-day-old legitimate son of Shiva, right? And Shiva, what started the whole problem, Shiva is in meditation, because Sati, his wife, has committed sati, has burned herself in the yogic fire, insulted by Daksha, and withdrawn, no longer physically present, making everything inauspicious. Shiva, in great lamentation, has gone into the Himalayas to meditate. He went to Amarnath, the Amarnath cave, and meditated thousands of years, right? Just meditating on her essential nature, on the real nature of Devi, right? So the boon that Taraka asked is, I can only be killed by Shiva's son. Knowing Shiva has no son, Shiva's very much in his monastic mode, living in a cave with his eyes closed, finding the Devi within. This is the job description of sannyasis. We're supposed to live in a cave, close our eyes, and find the Devi within, right? Not open our eyes and look for the Devi outside. That's a different mode of life, right? We're supposed to find her within. He's in a sannyas mode right now. But there's a second thing he asked for. He asked for unrivaled rulership of the three worlds. There's two boons, if I remember properly, that were granted to him, that he could easily control the three worlds, and that his death could only come by Tarakasura. So of course they're related. If nobody can kill you, you can easily take things over. So he kicks over heaven, kicks the gods out of heaven. He himself is lord of the hellish realms as the king of the demons. And then of course humans are easy prey. It doesn't take much to confuse us and take over, right? So he takes over the three worlds, and he can't be killed except by the son of Shiva and his wife. Shiva has no wife. So that's the core story. He's going to mention the core story. The demon chief Taraka torments us day and night. Next verse. Śivāṅgajādvad. Śivāṅgajādvad. Generally, Śivāṅga is a way of saying, we found that in the opening verses, the beginning of this chapter had a similar word. Śivāṅga was used for the wife of Shiva. Anga means limb, it means associate, right? And something we see like, we have it's like, oh, my better half or something like that. We have, it's like, it's an associate, and it's a somebody one to whom one is attached. It's also so intimate that's like a limb. So it's a way of saying wife, sangha. So Śivāṅgajādvad, the offspring of Śivāṅga, right, of Shiva and his wife, right? So means the offspring of Shiva, the legitimate offspring of Shiva, meaning of the son of Shiva and his wife. Shiva has no wife, right? His death shall come at the hands of Shiva's son, right? So has Brahma arranged. O Shiva, right? O śive. Śive means O Shiva. So this is again a rhymey type of quality. The verse starts śivāṅgajādvad-hastasya nirmitto brahmaṇā śive. Starts with Shiva, ends with Shiva. Shiva doesn't have a wife. O Shiva, right? So Shiva here, śive means O Shiva, right? It's a way of address. It's a beautiful name, the Divine Mother, right? And it can be translated as the feminine form of Shiva. Therefore, it's Shiva's wife, and that's kind of a play, right? Because Shiva doesn't have a wife. Oh, wife of Shiva, right? Kind of, because their prayer is that you take birth in some form, take a body, become Parvati, and I mean she's going to become Parvati and marry Shiva and have a child, right? So Shiva, his Tarakasura's death can only come by Shiva's son, from Shiva and Shiva's wife's son. Oh, Shiva's wife, right? That's one way of saying it. But we know from the Devi Bhagavatam in general that śive does not primarily mean Shiva's wife, because Bhuvaneshwari is not Shiva's wife, right? We won't get to these verses, so I'm not going to ruin the punchline. Next week we'll start with verses when she will agree to be born, right? But she says an aspect of her will be born as Parvati, right? And we'll talk about that more next week. And an aspect of her will be born, not she will be born as Parvati. She remains supreme, the supreme witness, the supreme knower, the supreme power, the supreme controller, as Bhuvaneshwari in this text, right? An aspect of her becomes the wife of Shiva. An aspect of her becomes the wife of Vishnu. An aspect of her becomes the wife of Brahma, becomes Saraswati, Lakshmi, Parvati, and all the different Devi incarnations are aspects of her. Amsas mean parts of her, not her herself. She remains supreme, right? So śive means, Shiva means, it's an epithet for Shiva, means good, beneficent, divine, auspicious. So he's translated auspicious. You are the auspicious one. So you are the auspiciousness of the auspicious one. You are the auspiciousness of Shiva, right? You are auspicious of everything, right? So so it's kind of it's praising her, recognizing her supremacy, as well, I think, playing with, please be, you'll have to also be born, so you'll have to arrange somehow to become Shiva's wife. And Shiva in both senses. You are the original Shiva, right? As well as you are, hopefully, you'll take a birth, I mean, as Shiva's wife, somehow arrange that. śivāṅgajādvad tu nā'jñātaṃ. So it says the second part, śivāṅgajādvad means Shiva's wife, right? Tu, but, right? nā'jñātaṃ. Shiva has no wife, right? So this is the thing, only the son of Shiva, O Shiva, right, can kill this horrible tormenting demon. Shiva has no wife, right? It says Janasi Tvam Maheshwari. Janasi, you, this you already know. Remember, she's the knower of everything, right? You already know the problem. You know the problem. You know Shiva has no wife. You know Taraka cannot be killed except by Shiva's son, right? O Maheshwari, Maha Ishwari, great controller, great ruler, right? The one who the all-powerful one. Right? Shiva has no wife. So it says, his death shall come at the hands of Shiva's son. So has Brahma arranged, O auspicious one. But as you know, great ruler, Shiva has no wife. One second here. Okay. Brahma one second here. We'll continue. Go back to that point. So, verse 61. We're doing good on time. This is unusual. I want to finish this little section tonight. I think we'll make it without going an hour over. So she's been described as all-knowing, right? A witness of all-powerful, the supreme power, the supreme controller, the great controller, right? Who knows everything, right? So once again, one of the things we point out, we try to bring emphasis is she is all-knowing. We know, so our knowledge is so limited that can be described as ignorance. I remember I think people say like, oh, I've forgotten more than when you're praising somebody, they've forgotten more than I'll ever learn about a particular topic. So when you praise an expert, right? It's like our knowledge is so small compared to this expert, right? She is a great expert. So sarva-jṇayā pīḍitāḥ kimva. Where is it here? Sarva-jṇayā pīḍitāḥ kimva. Sarva-jṇayā, all-knowing. You are all-knowing. Pīḍitāḥ, in front of you, in front of somebody who's all-knowing. So they're speaking some small detail in front of somebody who's all-knowing, right? Vaktavyam means we're speaking. Who speaks such things? Who would speak something in front of somebody who's all-knowing, right? It says paramārahi means fools. right? Foolish people, right? Fools amongst people. Foolish people speak in front of all-knowing people, right? But also, so he put in the question: what is it? What can Kimba? What can a foolish person, right? Actually, the term is actually can become even hard, like idiots, right? In comparison, right? What can us ignorant people, right? What can us ignorant people say in front of somebody who knows everything? Sarva-jṇayā, in front of an all-knowing person, right? This is the question. What can we speak in front of God who knows everything? What can we tell God that God doesn't know, that he needs us or she needs us to remind her or inform her about? People say, oh, somebody's sick. Oh, I'll immediately go tell mom. It's like, okay, I'll read it right now. I'll go tell her because she doesn't know, right? Obviously, she knows everything. It would be foolish for us to think that she doesn't know everything. It says, Eta udeshataha proktya param tarkaya ambike, right? So we'll simply tell you our problem in brief, right? We've told you our problem in brief, right? Taraka torments us day and night. He can only be killed by the son of Shiva. Shiva has no wife. Oh, maybe wife of Shiva, right? What else can we say? We don't have to say that much. We'll say just this much, right? Just a little bit, right? This is our situation in brief, right? Tarakya ambike. You can figure out the rest. You can guess the rest. Because there's more problems. So many problems come. If you simply said, we've been kicked out of heaven by a horrible demon, and he can't be killed, how much suffering that must imply? How much embarrassment? How much grief? How much struggle? A whole life of struggle, right, has led to a situation where thousands of years of austerities would be necessary. When we're willing to practice thousands of years of difficult spiritual practices, because what happened is so bad, right? And so we can take this a little symbolically, and I think we need to take this very symbolically, that perhaps we are in a similar situation. Spiritual aspirants are willing to do a lot, right? Maybe years of austerity, years of practice. Yeah, I did that. Yeah, thank you, Swamiji. I think so. I'll reread it just in case. Swamiji is wondering if I read something. I'm going to read just to make sure. Swamiji, whether his death shall be coming on the hands of Shiva's son. Brahma has arranged, auspicious one. But as you know, great ruler Shiva has no wife. Yeah, I think that's what Swamiji was pointing. Hope I didn't leave any verses out. What can ignorant beings reveal to one who is omniscient? Such I should in brief. You can infer the rest, O mother. So, we are willing. Many devotees, spiritual aspirants, are willing to go through much difficulty, right? Rearrange their whole life, to rearrange their motivations, everything, right? And do sometimes difficult things, some disciplines, right? To not do everything we want to do things we don't want to do even, right? Because the situation has gotten, we need a divine response. We need a divine response because the situation has gotten so bad, right? Whatever our Tarakasura will be. Tarakasura, he has taken over the three worlds. That's a big statement, right? What are the three worlds? Heaven, hell, and the earth, past, present, and future, right? As we read earlier, she is a knower of the three worlds. What are the three worlds? Or everything. Three worlds mean everything, right? All aspects of us, right? When a demon takes over all aspects of us, what can happen, right? It becomes unbearable, right? We become cut off from who we really are, and therefore, anyway. So this is I believe this is the way we need to interpret Tarakasura, right? And they're a real problem. They're real crisis that the gods are in. So the final verse we'll do tonight. I'll say one thing. I will go back just a second here. Back to that, because in the previous verse I said there's a difference between us and her. We know a little bit, she knows everything. We are the witness of a tiny bit, she's the witness of everything, right? So here again, we are ignorant beings, and she is sarva-jṇayā. We are ignorant, she has knowledge. So the difference between Brahman and Jiva, another big difference is ignorance. So in the opening verses of the next chapter, we'll get to in a few weeks, God willing, God is willing, she'll describe Maya. She'll introduce this term Maya, right? And the term Maya will be used several times, there's many understandings of Maya in Vedanta and yoga and bhakti and like that. And the Devi Gita engages several of them. And some people's minds, these different interpretations of Maya will be not contradictory, cannot be rectified together, right? But the Devi Gita we have to understand what she means by Maya. She uses the classical ideas of Maya as well as devotional schools of Maya to try to get at it. But for now, we can just start with our first swipe at it, is that she contains Maya. Maya is one of her energies, right? When we engage Maya, it's called ignorance. It's her power by which how the one becomes many by her power of Maya, right? But for us, the experience is that of ignorance, not knowing. So Maya in the individual is ignorance. Maya for her is one of her powers by which she seems to become many, by which she becomes many, or which she seems to become many, or by which she makes us think she's many. All those will be discussed, right? So I think that's another important difference between us and her. She has Maya, we have ignorance. Therefore, she remains all-knowing, while we remain ignorant. So the final verse we'll talk tonight. Sarvada. Before we get to this, because this is how it ends with this point. Well, she knows everything, right? We still need to tell her our needs, right? There may be at a very high state, or I know people who very great devotees, not just like great ascetics and Vedantists and like that, who are in a particular stance and mental stance of witness or something like that. But devotees also like, oh, I don't pray. Ma knows everything. She knows what I need, right? I don't need to pray for anything. She knows my needs. She knows what's best, right? So I asked some devotees, do you not pray for anything? As though I pray for love. I pray for devotion. And then we push back. He says, but doesn't she know you need devotion? He says, yeah, but still, love means relationship, right? And so it's natural for me to share the prayer, let me love you more, comes out of love, right? Even the prayer, I have other problems, other things that are bothering me, that I'm struggling with, that are in the way, right? That cause me pain and suffering. That also is a way of love. We can describe those things, right? But even the highest desire, if the highest desire is love, and spoiler alert, this verse says the highest desire is love, right? Before we read it, I just said it. Can't help myself, right? We can ask for it, right? Even that doesn't she know? Of course she knows. We're ignorant. She knows everything. She knows our problem. She knows our problem is our lack of love for her, and she knows the solution is for us to love her more, right? And therefore, and she also, so still we should ask for love. Swami Ramakrishna really emphasized this love and longing to be the essence of spiritual practice. And somebody asked him, what if you don't have longing? What if you don't love God and love? Well, then you should want to love God, knowing that's our real problem, right? And so and he says, pray to God for longing, even if you don't have longing. Just think how wonderful that is. You know, you can even, and I know Sri Ramakrishna even said one thing, he mocked, not mockingly, but spoke in somebody's voice. You know, it's like, I don't know who you are, and I don't know if you exist, right? But if you exist, please reveal your nature to me, even if you don't believe in God, right? He says, if you exist, please reveal yourself to me, right? So even that we can ask for, right? So this is this verse is the culmination of their prayer, right? Sarvara charana ambuje. Sarvada, always. Charana means feet. Ambuja is a type of lotus. There's many names for lotus. Our friend, we have a Sanskrit scholar friends that if you don't know what a word means in Sanskrit, see if lotus works. There's so many hundreds of words for lotus. And so this is one of those words. Padma and things like that are there for lotus, but ambuja is a type of lotus, a type of that's why I included a picture of Ma's foot on a lotus, Ma's lotus feet, right? And of course, we've already discussed the beautiful poetic spiritual meaning of a lotus, of all the things that a lotus represents. So we won't go back into that. Why Ma's feet are described as lotus feet or lotus-like feet. Charanam bhuje, ambujam, right? Bhaktisya tava nischala. What do you say? Bhakti syat tava nischala. Bhakti syat tava. May we have devotion for your tava, lotus feet, right? Nischala. Chala means wavering, moving. Nischala means unwavering, unchanging. He's described it, he translated unswerving, right? Unswerving, yeah, unswerving. I would say unchanging, unmoving, right? May we always have unfixed, right? That's another way of saying unmoving means fixed devotion, right? A consistent, constant, unchanging devotion to your lotus feet. This is, says, where is it? Where is the word? Prarthaniyam. You know, mukyam param. This is our supreme prayer, our supreme boon. Mukyam param, our supreme prayer, our supreme boon. Prarthaniyam. Prarthaniyam means to beg. We're begging this. Actually, parata means prayer. Parata means prayer. So we're praying. This is our prayer. But this united with parathaniyam is translated often as like, we're begging you. We're not just praying. We're begging you, right? This is our foremost desire, our foremost need, our foremost wish, right? That we may have devotion for unflinching, unchanging, unwavering, and unswerving devotion for your lotus feet, right? This is our foremost prayer, our foremost wish, right? And then in half of a line, in 1/4 of a line, they ask for, and may you take a body. May you be born. It means may you arrange to be born as Shiva's wife, so that Kartikeya they can give birth to Kartikeya, Skanda, and Skanda at 4 or 5 years old can kill Taraka and Rid, and then we can attain our divine abode once again, freeing, bringing peace and order to the 3 worlds once again. We also pray that may you can assume a body, right? Deha hetave, right? Param he deha hetave. So the main point of the story is not the battle between the gods and the demons, right? And that is the main point of many ancient myths, to use the word non-pejoratively, right? We read the Chandi. It's a big so many Puranas have a great war between the gods and the demons, and that's one way we can see our own struggle of a war between gods and demons, right? We can, I mean, some people see the world this way, right? I think it's a dangerous way to view the world, as a fight between gods and demons, but we can also view our own struggle. That can be pretty heavy, though. As we know, we can be really heavy. And, you know, sometimes I've read in my early days a lot of writings of Russian Orthodox monks, right? And you can see the internal struggles with the mind is a fight with demons, right? Where every desire in the mind becomes a demonic attack that has to be fought against. And that's a power. I mean, that tradition makes sense. So that's a way of spiritual struggle and purification works, but it's exhausting, right? A way of looking at the world. Everything's a battle between gods and demons. Every desire is a demon, right? Or imagine literally thinking every desire is a demon attacking, right? I mean, I can't imagine. I mean, I can't imagine, but I try not to view the world this way, right? So there was a move in the later Puranas, to which the Devi Bhagavatam is a classic example of and the Puranas, as we've discussed in our opening discussion on the Purana, our first talk about the Puranas being primarily devotional, although each Purana has a different flavor of bhakti, right? And also sectarian, using the word broadly, meaning meant for a sect, meant for a group, a cultic group of devotees of a particular god or goddess, right? That consider like the devotees of Shiva, or the devotees of Krishna, or the devotees of Vishnu, or the devotees of Varaha, right? Or devotees of Skanda, devotees of Devi, of Kali, of Durga, Bhuvaneshwari, right? It's meant primarily devotional texts for that group of devotees, sectarian in that sense, right? But therefore devotional, right? So there's a move in the Puranas, right? Right. There's a move in the Puranas away from this conflict. And I think in the introduction of the Devi in Mackenzie Brown's introduction, I think he goes into this because he's an expert in Puranas specifically, and Devi Puranas specifically also. Puranas generally and Devi Puranas specifically, but he describes it as a move in the Puranas away from the conflict between gods and goddesses to focus on the Mahadeva, the great god, or the Mahadevi here, the great god, great goddess, right? Right. And now the conflict is not who gets to win, right? Although the stories, these are very ancient stories of the conflict between gods and gods, back from the Vedic hymns are full of, the earliest Vedic hymns have a lot of battles between gods and demons, right? We can much has been said about that, but it's more about developing emotional attachment and devotion to the great god, right? So that the gods and the demons are both devotees of the god or goddess, right? Gods, demons are not, their fight's not important. Their real nature is devotees of God, right? And what to speak of humans are meant to be devotees of God. The gods are meant to be devotees of gods. The demons are also devotees of gods, right? And if we interpret symbolically the gods, humans, and demons being the full aspect of our own personality, everything is meant to serve God. Everything is meant to be focused on God, to love God, to be absorbed in God, right? When we get separated and everything, we have the big turmoil within us, the real problem is not that the gods are losing and the demons are winning. The real problem is that we're not fully focused in our devotion. Our devotion is not fully awakened, or to use the language of this verse, our devotion is flickering, right? We sometimes think of God and then sometimes forget God. That is our real problem. And from these opening verses, Vishnu said, you suffer because you forget her. That's why you're suffering. right? And the way to end your suffering is to remember her, right? That's the real boon that we need to ask. That's being asked, right? So if the verse says, let's look at the verse. The verse says, "This is our foremost wish. May we always show unwavering, unswerving devotion to your lotus feet. This is our foremost wish. The secondary wish, we also pray that you take a body, right, in order to kill Tarakasura, because that has to be done. That stuff still has to be done, right? But our foremost wish is that. So what are we asking for? When Tarakasura, he's given, and in the sample of the story, he did tremendous austerity, right? I think he stood on his tiptoes, or inside of an anthill. I forget all the details. He did tremendous austerity in order to get a boon, and who gave him the boon is Brahma, right? Grandfather Brahma. He gives boons very easily, right? So he's praying. What is he praying? But he's praying for like more separation from God, right? The gods here are praying to end their separation from her, or let us love you, let us be absorbed in you, right? But he also prayed to God, but he prayed to be put more separate. I want to be God. I want to be the ruler. Nobody can kill me. Nobody can challenge me, right? So if this is a demon that's come up, right? The literal demon in the story, or the literary demon in this, maybe the literal demon in cosmology, the literary demon in the story. But personally, this is a demon that can come up. We have things that come up in us that make us not want to separate us from God, right? Separate us from that love of God, right? We lose our focus. Tarakasura comes and causes unlimited suffering. We lose our original dignity. And the three worlds, not only the human world, the God, the divine world, the human world, and even the underworld, everything is polluted, everything is unhappy when we're not focused on God. So the story says, I believe this is what the story is saying. So what do we pray for? We have to be careful what we pray for, not to pray like Tarakasura. I'm remembering Swami Bhajanananda, we were discussing it today or yesterday, I think yesterday. And Swami, I remember there was a Swami, we've kind of lost contact with him. I think he's moved out of state, named Shankaracharya Swami. He's a Shaktipat guru from Tennessee originally, who moved in our, anyways, he's an old friend, if I can say, respectfully. He's a senior Swami, but he's very affectionate. He was very affectionate with us when he lived in the area. And one time he joking with us, he says, "Don't be a yogi demon, right? Don't be a yogi demon." He said, "A yogi demon?" He says, "The yogis do the same sadhana we're doing, right? The same mantras, the same austerities, fasting, whatever things we're doing, they're also doing, but they're doing it to be separated from God, right? We should be doing that. We do those sadhanas, hopefully, right? To have union with God, love for God, to remove our ego, to be focused on her lotus feet unswervingly, right? So not to be a yogi demon is important, right? Because the boon of Brahma, right? When Brahma gave him the boon, Brahma answered his prayer. Of course, Brahma is famous for this, right? But we could also ask boon. She says, "I'm a wish-fulfilling tree." Right? Whatever you ask, you can get from me. We have to be careful not to ask for Maya, not to ask for ignorance, not to ask for ego, right? Be very careful what we ask, right? Because she can answer our prayers, right? And we have to we have to remember, we have to think, whatever we ask, what are we really asking? They asked for the death for her to be born, which of course is a wonderful thing, right? And for the demon to be killed, but really what they're asking for is devotion. And so I interpret this, I'm justifying I'm using this verse, let's look at the verse again, to justify I believe there is a hermeneutical clue there. I've just coined a new theological idiom, hopefully, a hermeneutical clue, interpretive clue to understand what Taraka means. Whoever Taraka is, whatever. So remember, because it's not just what's being said, but what's being said to us, right? As sadhaks, right? We're not gods, and a demon hasn't taken over. But we are gods. We're divine, and demons have taken over. We lost our focus. We're not focused on her lotus feet continuously. Our highest prayer isn't only devotion, right? And so we want devotion. That's our primary, it says this is our foremost wish. That means the secondary wish is, oh, Ma, you fix the problem, right? That means, so I would interpret, and this is what I'm going to venture forth a little bit and boldly say, that whatever the Taraka is what's stopping, let me say that, Taraka is what's stopping them from fulfilling their primary wish, right? So all of our struggles, all of our sufferings are things that are stopping. The real problem, our real Taraka is that which is stopping us from satisfying our real wish, to our real desire, which is our foremost wish, right? Of that of always having unswerving devotion to the Divine Mother's lotus feet. So Sri, I think last week we gave the same example, but I want to repeat it again and again, because I think it's all important. Sri Ramakrishna's example of the magnet and the needle. A needle's nature is always to be attracted by a magnet. If it's not, something's wrong. Either it's very far from the magnet and not feeling its influence, or it's so encrusted with dirt and mud and rust or whatever that it cannot move, right? So what's stopping it, right? So you have to remove what's stopping it, right? Sadhana is one of the purpose of sadhana is to purify, maybe the only purpose of sadhana is to purify the mind and heart, right? To wash the mud, the rust, the clay off the needle. Then automatically the needle is pulled, right? It's ontological reality of a needle. It's essential nature to be pulled by to feel the attraction of a magnet. If it doesn't, then it's off its own nature, right? So if bhakti is their foremost goal, then Tarakasura is what's preventing bhakti, right? So if bhakti is our foremost goal, maybe it's conscious, maybe we can be conscious of this. I believe this text and all bhakti yoga texts are telling us that our real desire is love of God. That is our essential desire and our real need, and the thing that's why if we're not happy, if we're not fulfilled, is because our nature is to love God and we're not, and to have union with God, and we seem to be separated. Of course, not really, right? She's right here, right? Excuse me. Second. So if bhakti is our real goal, whatever is stopping our goal is the demon, is our Taraka, or whatever the demon is. And of course, we can give symbolic nature, and there's a whole science of I can't say it's demonology, but demonology here means the study of the symbolic nature of demons. And like, for instance, like Raktabija means this, and Mahishasura means this, and Putana means this in Krishna Lila, like that. There's ways of interpreting. Sages have given some things are very obvious, other things sages have given the clue. So I think this verse is maybe hinting at the clue of Tarakasura, whatever Taraka is, right? Is Taraka represents that which fills our three, past, present, and future, the three worlds, fills our mind and makes us forget God. And through spiritual sadhana, we begin to awaken. We get to have some experience, perhaps, right? Things get so bad, we suffer, we go to God. By spiritual sadhana, the mind and heart are purified, we get some spiritual experience. That spiritual experience inflames us, right? From the gods' original suffering, whatever original, the suffering that caused them Tarakasura's problem caused them to search for God. Imagine they had some desire. Obviously, they had much desire for God, right? Even if it was to end the suffering. If the desire for God was to end suffering, they had so much desire for God to engage in difficult sadhanas, right? But when they experience a little bit of God, right, that divine experience of the vision and hearing her and seeing her, right, now the primary desire is in the forefront. They're inflamed, right? Now they know who they want. They know what they really wanted the whole time, right? So she will say, I will be born, right? You've pleased me, and gives a beautiful saying when she agrees to be born. I'll read that next week, right? But then that's fine. You be born, great, right? But how will we have unending union with you? That's the real question, right? And my light goes out here. How do we have unending union with you? The rest of the Devi Gita, right? We're 62 verses into 700 verses. I believe Devi Gita 700 verses, right? Right, will be on that. How instructions and teachings, right? Practices, right? How we can have union with her all the time, never forget her, be unwavering devotion to lotus feet, and even at the divine goal as presented in this text, which is a little bit but in the Vedantic language of a union with her essential nature. So we'll leave it with that tonight. That's a pretty good goal, a good reminder that what our real goal is. Whatever our struggles are, to remind ourselves that our struggles are symptoms of our disconnection, right? And spiritual life awakens that knowledge, and the more experience we get, the more the goal becomes clear, right? And as the goal becomes clear, also the obstacles become clear. And we realize what needs to be done. This is her teaching. She's going to say what the obstacles are, what needs to be done. This is that play of realization and revelation, right? The closer we get, the clearer we see the goal, and the better understanding we have of our struggles, the real struggles, and what needs to be done. So we'll leave it there. Thank you for your kind attention. Are there any questions or comments? We finished. Well, I thought it would be. I didn't do it. I thought I'd finish it in 1 hour. It's still an hour and a half. Sorry. All right. Swamiji, anything?
Elijah.
I'm okay, so at the very end, I decided, even though we've had people look into it before, I decided to Google the meaning of Tarakasura.
Yes.
Because I was just curious to see if I could find anything different. And I found this fascinating, is that the very first thing that came up matches your words pretty much precisely. This is from wisdomlib.org. It says Tarakasura means the demon of salvation, and he represents those factors which hinder real progress in both material and spiritual terms. The demon personifies our selfish delusions of what we think is our own self-interest, but is actually not. A person with a migraine headache, for example, may think it is in their best interest to have a hole drilled in their head to relieve the pressure. A misadvantage would surely result in death.
Yes.
So
No, that's the interesting thing. That's playing, because Taraka means salvation. That which takes us across is Taraka, right? So Tarakasura, of course, some people say, oh, salvation is the demon, and we shouldn't aim it. But that's not obviously what's being meant here. That's not some people hold salvation to be something bad, right? I remember one time, because something in the devotional schools, salvation, as generally understood in classical Vedanta, is not held as the supreme goal, right? Bhakti and union with God in a different way. A different type of union, not identity or disappearing into God, as some Vedic schools word it sometimes. But I remember Swami Chaitanya, somebody was in our community was a little bit in that mood from the devotional schools, arguing against liberation, right, against freedom, right. And he said, well, what if Swami Chaitanya was here, and he was reading some Vedanta classic. He's a good old-fashioned Vedantist when it comes to these verses, and he was presenting liberation as the supreme goal. And somebody said, well, what if the liberation is not your goal? Right? He goes, foolish, you idiot. Who wants to be bound? Right? Who wants to be bound? Nobody wants to be bound, right? Of course, what we mean by that is that a different definition of freedom, right? Bhakti is a different definition of freedom. That's fine, right? So we have to understand liberation or freedom to be whatever our spiritual goal is, to be free in our spiritual goal, free to love God, or free to be one with God, or free to play with God, or free to live in God's kingdom, or freedom from birth and death, or whatever the freedom idea of freedom is. It's still a beautiful idea. Being bound by God is also freedom, We're free from the material clutches and the ego. We completely become slaves of God. It's not freedom. That's real, although it's real freedom, right? But the idea of Taraka Sura there, I've also seen that definition. Taraka Sura is a demon that stops us from getting salvation. That stops us from being free, right? All the things that stop us from attaining our real freedom was Taraka. So Taraka can represents anything that's stopping. I believe that's what this verse is maybe hinting at. That's what I've interpreted. It represents anything that's stopping us from loving God by having devotion to Ma's lotus feet unwaveringly, right? Is Taraka Sura.
Hadn't we also seen in the past that Taraka means star?
Yes, that's why.
Because I was thinking,
yeah.
is that if star is a meaning, sorry, if star is also a meaning of it, it could be that because we just talked about the possibility that it means salvation as well, right? That the star, often in the past, people look towards the stars to reach their destination, right? So I don't know, maybe it being that thing that, I don't know, you don't go towards the star though. The star points you in the right direction. I don't know. It's not fully elaborated. It's just a small
good contemplation. I think we were in Mexico at the time we gave the class where we talked about Taraka Sura. I have to go back and maybe the third or fourth talk or something in the series, or class in the series, right? And we discussed. And then I had in my notes, I had my pages of notes on Taraka, some of his backstory, etymologically what it meant, and I don't remember all those subtle points. I remember Tara means star, and Taraka also means freedom or crossing over. So I'm not sure how that works, but what the etymology is. But interesting point for sure.
Oh, Shamala Devi Ma, you had your hand up?
Yes, Jaima. What stood out to me about what Elijah just read about Taraka also meaning salvation is that when we have those demons, when we have those experiences in life, that is the thing that causes us to go back to Ma's feet, because the suffering is so great. The only thing that will free us is liberation. The only thing that will free us is her. So maybe that
interesting, because actually we should maybe at the end of the whole thing they will bless Taraka, right? Because things had got so bad that they searched for God, right? Interesting. I'm reminded of Mahendranath Gupta, the author of the Katamrita, the Gospel of Sri Ramakrishna. And I may paraphrase a little bit, not the direct quote, but because he says, I bow to my family problems. He had tremendous family problems, but those family problems made him so desperate he was going to commit suicide, right? And his family, some friends, in order to stop him from committing suicide, knowing his poetic nature, took him to some gardens, right, to get his mind off his family problems. A lot of family problems. Swami Bhajanananda has written very nicely on this. But as a result of which, one of the gardens he went to was Dakshineshwar, where he met Sri Ramakrishna by accident, right? So he says, I thank my family problems, right? How horrible, they must have been really bad if he was so desperate. He was planning the next day to, I'll visit some gardens with my friend and then commit suicide tomorrow. That was kind of his plan. It was gotten so bad, right? So anyway, he bowed to his family problems. So even Taraka Sura we may bow to eventually, whatever our Taraka is. We can look back in our life and realize that the great demons and struggles were parts of the path also. So during Durga Puja, we worshipped Mahishasura Mardini, Ma Durga with 10 arms killing Mahisha, right? And at the very end of the whole thing, the final flower of the whole 4-day, hundreds of hours of month, dozens of hours of mantras of the final thing is Etaganda Pushpe Mahishāsurāya Namaha. With this fragrant flower, I worship Mahishasura, the great demon Mahisha. Because if it wasn't for him, none of this would have, the whole story wouldn't have happened, right? And so he's the hero, right? He's the great villain. I mean, he's the anti-hero, the villain. I guess in I'm sure there's in literature there's a term for him. I mean, no, I forget what it's called, but we're thankful for him also, because also sometimes if it doesn't get that bad, we just live our life as if we're fine, right? If we're not desperate, right? And so sometimes Usha uses a term, taken from Sri Ramakrishna. It says, if you're not hungry, you're not hungry. You can't make somebody hungry, because we see sometimes people are focused on God, sometimes they're not focused on God. What can you do? You can't convince them. You can't convince somebody they're hungry. They're either hungry or not. When they get hungry, they'll look for food, right? And so sometimes you see we have periods, we call them dry periods or something like that, right? And it's one thing is if we're struggling, we don't get experience. That's one type of dry period. But the real spiritual ones is that weeks go by or years go by, and yes, we're just not that interested. We're not searching. We're not hungry for God. That's a very dangerous position to be in, to be comfortable, not being uncomfortable for God, something like that, right? Hunger is the most important thing. So, yeah.
My other question is the two birds. Could the highest bird also represent one who is free from karma, because it's not eating any fruit, and the lower bird?
So because yes, it is, but the self is always free from karma, right? So it's it's the ego that gets caught in the world of karma, right? The false ego, the hamka, the manas, buddhi, hamkara, these get the antara gets caught in karma. And karma actually, it does not touch the self. Like the self doesn't act, therefore karma does not touch the self. It is that for sure. Yeah, it's so it's a very interesting image for sure. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. Anybody else?
Ron Molly?
Ron Mali.
Jai Ma.
Jai Ma.
So could we synthesize and say that Taraka is the Jiva Maya of ignorance?
Yeah, we could make it that abstract. Taraka is Jiva Maya, or Taraka is something that's got out of control within Jiva Maya. Something that's taken, because there's a line in the Taraka Sura has its own story, but in the Chandi, in the Devi Mahatyam, the line that overwhelms me when I think about it, right? It says, Mahisha became Indra. Right? Mahisha is bad enough as an underworld demon, right? But we all need, everybody, the world needs underworld demons too, right? Everything needs the world needs the full spectrum, and we need the full spectrum. We need anger and lust, and these are all the things, the energies of the body and the energies of the mind that keep us safe and dynamic and prosperous and procreating, the whole thing, right? But when one of them when a low energy sits on Indra's throne, he becomes Indra. It means he becomes the Lord of the three worlds. That's I think that's a crisis. That becomes a spiritual crisis, right? Rather than just generally the nature of Jiva Maya, of the condition of of the Jiva, right? I think it may be something to call him a demon is I think is dramatic, right? I think when things get I think, I mean, the way I see the story of the demons is not just generally our separation from God or our root ignorance about the nature of reality or something like that. I think it's something that's so overwhelming that it becomes unbearable, cannot survive. Something has to give. Yeah, I don't know. That's how I think. That's how I think the demons' stories are. They come to a point. They come to a breaking. Something has to happen. You know. Yeah.
Because
Guruji,
Yeah.
go ahead.
it's just interesting because, like, you know, if you look at this narration that's going on, and then you look at the world, the Kali Yuga, right?
Mm.
And you see this repeated pattern that's happening. So you have these multiple embodiments, if you will, of Tarakasura,
Yeah. Yeah.
right? And you see that even in like the Theravada Buddhist texts, right? In you see some of those same kind of parallels. So yeah, it was just a comment.
Yeah, no, the idea of the yugas, the Kali Yuga is a time when these subtle and profound inner struggles that people struggle with, right, are externalized, right? So it's not just that we forget God; the world has forgotten God. This is the statement. If you read, I mean, the Bhagavatam in the 11th skanda. 12th skanda of the Bhagavatam, last book of the Bhagavatam, has some far out descriptions of Kali Yuga, right? And you realize it's just like, you know, how bad it can get. It's a description of a life or a world where God's not important, God's forgotten, selfishness reigns supreme, Taraka is glorified, right? You know, and so, you know, and that's a cycle of the world. That's not just a cycle of a human. Taraka takes control and then we wake up. It's also the cycle of the world. The world goes into this type of darkness. We forget the divine, and then there's a shift again, and again a new yuga, a new age happens. You know, but this is the view of most schools of Hinduism and most schools of Buddhism also, that we're in a dark age where the internal struggle that every yogi, every devotee has to deal with, right, is mirrored in the outside world, right? That's a problem. Right? It makes it more difficult for sure. Makes it difficult for sure. Yeah.
Guruji,
Yeah.
Michael Nash.
Michael
has
Nash.
hand up.
Oh, thank you, Swamiji. I'm just glad to hear that my nature is to love God. So I don't have. I mean, it doesn't mean I'm going to be complacent and not do sadhana.
Yeah.
But that if I'm having trouble finding devotion,
Yeah.
it's in there. It's, you know, I just have to get to it.
Yeah. Yeah. No, that's a beautiful. But I think to rest in that knowledge, right? Of course, we shouldn't rest in that knowledge. It's restful. Right, but it should become passionate, right? You know, it's like sometimes we don't have the passion. We know that it's our nature. Things cover it up like that, right? But you know, Sri Ramakrishna many times said, right? If you like imagine a thief, right? Who somebody tell them that in the room you're staying in right now, just underneath the house, under the floorboards, there's a treasure, there's money, right? It says also good night. So the thief will just go to bed knowing, oh, he should know that there's money, that underneath his floorboard where he's sleeping, somewhere in there's some buried treasure. So he knows this is treasure. No, he can get to no problem. He will not sleep the whole night. He will not take 1 week. He'll pull up the boards. He'll dig it. He'll tear down the house, right, looking for the pot of gold or the treasure or whatever the treasure is, right? So the knowledge that God is real and it's our nature, right? The more we contemplate it, we take it seriously, right? It inflames us, right? And I think that's one of the important things about the devotional tradition, right? It's an emotional tradition. There's different types. In one of our classes of the seminary, we talked about the different types of devotion, right? And there are many different types of bhavas of devotion, right? But the bhakti movement, we say devotion as a cultural religious movement that spread throughout India, and we're part of that tradition also. It's passionate, emotional search for God, right? It can't be left just with knowledge that it's there, right? Although when we're not feeling it, we should know it's there. But then if we're not feeling it, becomes, in the I'm remembering just verses coming to me. The verse in the Narada Bhakti Sutra. We gave a series of classes in Narada Bhakti Sutra many years ago. I think they're in the podcast. I think they're there. I don't think in the videos, they're in the podcast. But there's one line that says that devotion manifests with a longing for God and a great disgust for that which keeps us from God. Right? You become so, it's like that's the thing. You walk out and then you get almost frustrated by those things that stop us, that cover it. Right? We know it's there, but bhakti is the mad search for it and the great frustration and anger toward anything that covers it. Right. So maybe, I don't know, it's an interesting, I like the idea. Like, I also, just like you, I'm very relieved, right, with the knowledge that God, that divinity, where our nature is divine, and I'm a devotional temperament, right, the devotional schools of thought. Therefore, we think that not only that our nature is divine, our nature is to love the divine. Our nature is bhakti. Our nature is love for God, love for the source. Right, and give it enough time, or give it to and sadhana. My Guruji, my sannyas guru, Swami Bhajanananda Saraswati, he says many times, I've quoted this before, that sadhana is mana shuddhi. All sadhana is only mana shuddhi, purification of the mind and heart. Right, we purify the mind and heart, which is already there will gush forth. Hopefully, will awaken. Right, when the purified mind and heart, devotion awakens. But it's it's good to know it's who we are, right? But if we don't feel it, we know it's who we are, but that means we're not feeling who we are. We should feel uncomfortable not being who we are, right? And if we're not uncomfortable, we should make ourselves uncomfortable, right? Thank you.
Elijah.
It's me again. I'm back. I'm reminded when you said gushing forth, right? I'm reminded of a story from the gospel, right? The gospel of Sri Ramakrishna, where the man goes out to dig a well, right? And he stays out there all day and night. He doesn't come in. He doesn't drink food. He doesn't drink water. His wife and children come, or his wife comes, right? And she says, like, come to the house, eat some food, drink some water, go to sleep, and come back the next day and do it. So he goes and does it.
Yes.
And then he never gets the well dug, and everything dries up and all of his crops die, right? Yeah. But then there's the second man, right? And the second man stays, and his wife comes and says, come get some food. Go away. She yells at her, yells at her to leave, right? So this disgust that we're talking about, right? He doesn't want anything at all but to dig that well and get to the water, right? So he screams at her to leave, and she does, terrified, running away. And he digs the well and he gets the water. Then when he's done with that, he comes back to the house and smokes the hubble bubble.
Yeah, he says, prepare my food.
He gets the water.
Get my bath, and he has the smoke, right? And he listens, and then he listens to the gurgling sound of the water entering the well.
That's right.
The thing is that, so that type of passion is required to accomplish it, right? And so he described that some mediocre devotion, right? That they do something, but then they get, if it's not working, tomorrow I'll do it. It's a problem. It's a great story. Thank you. I love that story.
Guruji, if I remember correctly, Thakur is talking about in this, he says that's an example of fierce renunciation.
Yes.
Kind of that fierce But I've been listening to everyone and you, Elijah, by talking about all this talk about Taraka's name and the possible, double meanings and play on the word Taraka as like a shining and star and salvation. And it made me think of, I think in Bhakti Yoga, Swami Vivekananda says that even the very wicked person who does something horrible ultimately is motivated by love. It's misdirected, misguided, and but still the root is that love. And it makes me think like in like Tarakeshwar, he's trying to find freedom, but he's looking in the wrong places and going about the completely the worst way, and like, but it's his attempt to do the same thing, and the gods, they find freedom and they find devotion in the feet of Ma, but the demons are just going about it in a way that will make them ultimately dissatisfied and they will not find it. I remember in college, we read Christopher Marlowe's Dr. Faustus, and there was this scene that I always like think of. He gains complete knowledge and he gains complete wealth. Mephistopheles gives him everything, and at the very end, he says, "I want to go into space." And so Mephistopheles takes Dr. Faustus, takes him into space, and they see the globe of the Earth from very far away. And then there's this moment where Faustus, he takes his hand and he puts it over, and he realizes he can cover the entire Earth with his fist. And from that perspective, he suddenly realizes, he gets dejected because he suddenly realizes all of his desires, everything he wanted, everything is just this big. And all of a sudden, everything in the world meant, but he, not enough to change his ways. He was still, bound by his, contract. But I just remember that scene where it's like, he just got so dejected because it was a moment where there was a crack, and he realized that what he really wanted, the entire world could not give him. All of that desire for, but it was still a desire for fulfillment, a desire for knowledge, a desire for completion. But he just, in that kind of, it's just the idea, made me think of this idea of the misguided, the demon is the misguided. They're doing the same things, but it's the sankalpa is wrong, the guidance is wrong. Anyway, this is my
Very good. No, it's
musings.
you brought Faust into this. That's very excellent. Super excellent. Thank you. Anybody else? Super good conversation. This is your chance. All right, it's late. Well, thank you for this beautiful gathering. And next week we'll see what the goddess will respond to their requests. Remember, 2-part requests: unswavering devotion, and for her to take a body. Right, so it's interesting to be born. And so in the story, she gets born in Himalaya's house. Right, that's also very profound. Right, her birth is not a normal birth, because, and that's also part of, if Taraka Sutta is what's stopping them having devotion, her being born is the death of Taraka Sutta, which means they get devotion. Right, her being born is also is the response to let us love you with unswavering. So we see how she can be born also within us, and the story has so many layers of meaning. We'll dive into them next week. All right, good night. Jai Ma, Jai Ma. Happy Holi. We celebrated yesterday Holi, and Gaura Praneem the day before, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's birthday, is called Dol Yatra. Very auspicious full moon color festival. I have to wash up. I have a shirt I need to wash. I got a little bit of color on it. We didn't have too much rowdy play, but we had a little bit of play last night. All right, Jai Ma, Jai Ma. Holi Hai.
Holy hai.
Funny.
Swamiji,
Ah,
a quick question, Swamiji. Will you send me the link and time for tomorrow? Are we still doing that?
you have to, I'll do it tomorrow. I might have to figure it out. Maybe maybe in the afternoon, like 3, maybe. Does that
Ah.
work? Is that okay?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, we'll plan for 3.
Okay.
Swami-
Jai Ma.
Okay. Jai Ma, Jai Ma,
Swamiji,
Jai.
quick question.
From the Koa.
Hi, Koa.
Shamala, tell me.
Yes, has seminary started again?
No, so I'm arranging the new class on the Guru tradition, and
Mhm.
I got my general outline and filling in some notes, and trying to figure out a date that makes sense to start. So we usually have our classes on Sunday. That's the day most people can meet, but we have a couple holidays coming up. We have Easter and Mother's Day, so we'd have to skip at least one of them. We probably Easter we can't have, but if we skip 2, then all of a sudden our 8-week course becomes like a 10-week. It makes everything very long. So I'm trying to figure out how to keep it from getting an unlimited, unbounded course, right?
Yeah.
In the past, we did a meeting on. We had this happen a few years ago. I mean, it happens every year if we do it on Sunday classes, right? Where we still had official meeting on Mother's Day, but many people couldn't attend, and they watched the videos later, and then we took off for Easter for the Easter break. So, anyways, I'm glad you
Yeah,
mentioned.
appreciate
I mean, I was thinking we have to start like next week, but I'm not ready next week. So, so we'll have probably in 2-3 weeks. Hopefully, I'll make a decision next couple of days. I'm glad you mentioned because it makes me force so many things on our plate that one gets pushed aside. But I think I have a good we have 8 themes on the Guru tradition, historical as well as like personal and spiritual. And so anyways, I think it'll be because so much is said about the Guru that it's hard to make sense of it all and our place in it all. So I think it'll be a useful course. Maybe on the I'll put up a link maybe tomorrow on the student page, kind of my new outline of the classes. So you can kind of see. I need to fill them in a little bit, but I think we can. I have no problem. I mean, I have a problem talking too much, but I have no problem. I can talk on these topics, but I need to find also supportive materials so that makes it not just me ranting and raving and actually a nice educational course. So, all right, Jai Ma, Jai Ma.
Hey,
Jai Ma.